How many hidden forces lie behind humanity's fall? Few know the name Azazel, yet he lurks silently in the shadows of ancient texts, shaping the spiritual destiny of the earth. Today, we'll dive into one of the most mysterious and controversial figures in the spiritual realm, the fallen angel who taught men to wage war and led souls to perdition. Prepare for a revealing biblical journey. If you value spiritual knowledge and wish to delve deeper into the truth found in scriptures and sacred traditions, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to uncover the root of sin according to ancient sacred texts. Spreading this knowledge is more than a gesture, it's a mission. Who is Azazel according to apocryphal texts? Azazel rises to prominence in the Book of Enoch, an apocryphal text preserved mainly in the Ethiopian tradition and considered vital by ancient Jewish communities like the Essenes, who lived between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE. In the so-called Book of the Watchers, the first part of Enoch, Azazel is described as one of the 200 angels who, captivated by the beauty of human women, chose to abandon their heavenly abode and descended to Mount Hermon. This act of rebellion marks the beginning of a dark cycle. The angels, called Watchers, not only fathered giant offspring, the Nephilim, but also introduced forbidden celestial secrets to humans. Among them, Azazel was the one who contributed most to humanity's corruption. He taught men to forge swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, transforming a once harmonious world into a battlefield of war and destruction. To women, he revealed the art of vanity, the use of dyes to beautify the eyes and adornments for seduction. This knowledge, out of its proper time and without divine guidance, became perversion. The impact of Azazel's influence was so profound that, according to the text, there was great impiety, and they turned away and were corrupted in all their ways. Enoch recounts that men cried out to heaven for help amid the escalating chaos. The archangel Raphael then received the command from the Most High to punish Azazel. He was to be bound in the desert of Dudale, covered with sharp stones, and cast into darkness until the day of final judgment. His acts of corruption would not be forgotten, for, as the text states, the whole earth was corrupted by the teachings of Azazel. Let all blame be ascribed to him. This portrayal makes Azazel one of the most complex figures in spirituality, not merely a being who sinned, but the bearer of corrupted knowledge that turned the gift of wisdom into an instrument of destruction. Here, his name begins to echo through generations as a symbol of everything that perverts the divine purpose on earth. Azazel in the context of Yom Kippur and the Scapegoat. The ritual described in Leviticus, chapter 16, is one of the most unique and deeply symbolic ceremonies in the biblical tradition. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. This was the holiest moment in the Hebrew calendar, when the high priest entered the Holy of Holies to intercede for all of Israel. During this rite, 2 goats were chosen by lot, both pure, without blemish, but with very different fates. One would be sacrificed to the Lord, the other sent into the wilderness for Azazel. This mention of Azazel has fascinated scholars and mystics for centuries. The Hebrew text uses the expression La Azazel, which many interpret as for Azazel, suggesting that Azazel is not a place but an entity. According to the Talmud and rabbinic writings, the goat sent into the wilderness symbolically carried the sins of the people, and its physical removal from Israel represented the expunging of sin from the community. This transfer was not merely symbolic. The high priest laid hands on the goat, confessed all of Israel's iniquities, and only then was it led by a designated man into the barren wilderness, never to return. The wilderness here takes on a powerful spiritual role, a symbol of chaos, death, and the absence of God. If the wilderness is Azazel's domain, then he represents that which is separated from the sacred, the opposite of divine presence. Jewish mystical tradition, such as Kabbalah, sees Azazel as an adversarial spiritual force tied to the Kelipot, shells or spiritual impurities that envelop and obscure divine light. Thus, sending the goat to Azazel is, in essence, returning sin to its spiritual source, an act of purification that underscores the seriousness of evil and the need to separate it from the people. More than an ancient ritual, this episode reveals a profound spiritual truth. Evil must be recognized, confessed, and then expelled, not ignored. By naming Azazel in this process, the Bible invites us to understand that there are indeed specific spiritual forces operating behind the scenes of human history, receiving and feeding on unaddressed sin. The Yom Kippur liturgy, therefore, is not merely a symbolic act but a concentrated spiritual battle aimed at restoring the covenant between God and his people. Azazel's rolamediary role in humanities fall according to Jewish tradition. The oldest Jewish tradition, particularly that influenced by mysticism and intertestamental literature, portrays Azazel as a direct agent of humanity's spiritual degradation. His role goes far beyond that of a fallen angel who merely erred. He is regarded as a transmitter of corrupted knowledge, one who intentionally opened the gates of the sacred to profane use. In the writings of the Book of Enoch, the rebellion of the Watchers represents the first cosmic breach of divine order. In this context, Azazel is the disseminator of occult sciences that should have remained confined to the celestial realm. His actions are akin to those of the serpent in Eden, but with an even broader reach. While the serpent persuades Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge, Azazel provides practical tools for domination, vanity, and human self-sufficiency. He is, therefore, a symbol of boundary breaking, of humanity's invasion into territory reserved for God. The divine response to this transgression was severe. Not only is Azazel punished with eternal imprisonment in darkness, but the entire earth suffers the consequences of his teachings. The Nephilim, the giants born from the union of the Watchers and human women, are described as violent, insatiable beings who consume everything around them and even resort to cannibalism. This moral and spiritual collapse leads to the decree of the flood, narrated in Genesis. God declares that all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth, Genesis 6 verse 12, a clear allusion to the impact of the impure knowledge brought by Azazel and his companions. Jewish tradition sees in this episode not only punishment but a warning. Knowledge, when disconnected from its divine source, becomes destructive. This is why Azazel represents, for many rabbis and mystics, the danger of premature revelation. Wisdom must be sought with fear, humility, and reverence. When a celestial being like Azazel chooses to teach the manipulation of elements, the adornment of the body, or the use of precious stones for ostentation, he is shaping a civilization that forgets God and worships itself. This corruption led the world to such a chaotic state that the only possible response was the total renewal of creation through the flood. Azazel, then, is remembered as a milestone in the estrangement between God and humanity, an eternal reminder that not all knowledge is light, and some forms of knowledge can, in fact, be subtle paths to spiritual darkness. Azazel and his association with Satan and the fallen angels. The relationship between Azazel, Satan, and other fallen angels is a profound question that intertwines various spiritual traditions and layers of interpretation across centuries. While the canonical texts of the Bible do not directly identify Azazel with Satan, apocryphal writings and certain strands of Jewish and Christian mystical thought weave connections that position Azazel as an essential part of the rebellious spiritual structure opposing God's plans. In the Enochic tradition, Azazel is not Satan but shares with him a stance of active opposition to the divine. While Satan, especially in later Christian tradition, is seen as God's direct adversary, the accuser of humanity, and the supreme tempter, Azazel appears more as the agent of cultural and spiritual corruption. He does not merely sin but teaches sin. He does not only disobey but instigates humanity to live as he does. It's a role parallel to Satan's, but with a focus on spreading error as a way of life. The Epistle of Jude in the New Testament mentions angels who did not keep their original position but abandoned their proper dwelling and were chained until eternal judgment. This passage is a direct reference to the fall of the Watchers, rooted in the Book of Enoch. Peter, in his second epistle, echoes this theme, speaking of angels who sinned and were cast into Tartarus, an abyss of darkness reserved for judgment. These references reinforce the idea of a spiritual hierarchy of evil, composed of distinct beings united in their rebellion. Over time, especially in medieval tradition and Kabbalistic works, many scholars began to associate Azazel with a facet or ally of Satan. In some traditions, he becomes one of the commanders of hell or even a wandering spirit still exerting influence in the world, feeding the structures of sin and idolatry. The image of the goat for Azazel, isolated in the wilderness, was reinterpreted as a symbol of Satan's spiritual isolation, the one who is outside divine presence and leads others to the same fate. In later grimoires and esoteric texts, such as Colin de Plance's Dictionnaire Infernal, Azazel is presented as a demon of war, pride, and rebellion. This reflects the fusion of Jewish, Christian, and occult traditions over centuries, where figures of evil come to be seen as expressions of the same essence, the rejection of the Creator. Thus, Azazel occupies an ambiguous and powerful role. He is the master of subtle deception, the one who seduces through knowledge and appearances, while Satan acts more as the direct accuser. Together, they represent two arms of spiritual corruption, seduction and oppression, that remain active in the invisible battle between light and darkness. The spiritual symbolism of Azazel in the battle between light and darkness. The spiritual symbolism of Azazel transcends his figure as a rebellious angelic being and establishes him as a profound archetype present in humanity's moral, emotional, and spiritual structures. Within biblical and mystical tradition, he represents humanity's estrangement from the divine, not merely through an external choice, but as an internal movement of rebellion, a natural inclination of the flesh and soul against the Spirit of God. Azazel symbolizes that which leads humans to replace God's presence with the illusion of control, beauty, strength, and freedom. He is the spiritual reflection of vanity, unrestrained ambition, and the idolatry of the self. Everything he taught, from crafting weapons to using adornments for seduction, carries a single goal: to place humanity at the center of existence, making it its own creator and judge. In other words, Azazel represents the project of human autonomy disconnected from its creator. The struggle between light and darkness, so prevalent in scriptures, is intensified by Azazel's symbolic role. It's not just an external battle but an internal conflict, the struggle between the soul that seeks righteousness and the spirit that is enchanted by easy, seductive paths. This is why Jewish tradition understands that evil is not only an external enemy but an internal reality, the Yetzer Hara, the inclination to evil. In this context, Azazel is the spiritual manifestation of that inclination. He is not merely a fallen angel of the past, but a present reality in social systems, cultural values, and even individual thoughts that promote separation from divine light. Every time a person chooses the path of pride, violence, or sensuality without spiritual direction, they are, in a sense, allowing Azazel to continue his mission of distancing creation from its creator. Thus, combating him spiritually is not a war waged with swords or words, but a constant discipline of purifying the mind, heart, and body. It is a battle of return to humility, truth, and covenant with God. Azazel, with all his complexity, becomes a mirror of what we must avoid and a living reminder of the need for spiritual vigilance. When we look at the figure of Azazel, we see not just a fallen angel of the past, but an eternal warning about the paths that lead us away from God's will. By contrast, he teaches us to seek purity, humility, and true connection with the divine. If this content has touched you and helped you understand the spiritual universe revealed in scriptures more deeply, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Our mission here is to awaken your consciousness, strengthen your faith, and dive into the deepest roots of biblical truth. Give this video a like, share it, and help this message reach more hearts. Your engagement is a seed of light on the path to spiritual knowledge.